The night was silent, yet inside the glass mansion on the hill, tension hung heavier than the marble chandeliers. Rain whispered against the windows, and somewhere deep in the house, a man lay motionless on a king-sized bed, eyes closed, breath steady, pretending to sleep. Alexander Kane, the city's most powerful and feared CEO, had made fortunes rise and empires fall. But tonight, his power meant nothing. Tonight, he was just a man waiting to see whether anyone truly cared for him beyond his wealth. He had dismissed all his staff earlier that evening except one, the quiet maid who rarely spoke but never failed to notice what others ignored. Her name was Clara. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unseen love, then pause for a moment, like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stories like this one remind us that behind every cold heart, there's a reason, and behind every humble soul, there's hidden strength. Alexander had heard rumors among the staff that Clara often stayed late after her shift, cleaning more than she was required to, whispering small prayers for the household before leaving. It puzzled him. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had done something without expecting payment. The world he knew was built on transactions, deals, signatures, and conditions. Yet this young woman, barely 23, seemed different. There was a calmness about her, a gentleness that both intrigued and unsettled him. That night, he decided to test something. He wanted to see if her kindness was real, or just another act to please the boss. He'd feigned fatigue after dinner and retired early, giving instructions not to be disturbed. But when the house grew quiet, he waited. He lay still, eyes closed, pretending to sleep, while his mind churned with curiosity and doubt. He heard the soft rustle of footsteps enter the room, the faint clinking of a tray being placed down, and then, silence. Clara had come in quietly, carrying a bowl of soup he hadn't asked for. She believed he hadn't eaten enough that night. She thought he wouldn't notice if she left it on the bedside table. But what Alexander didn't expect was the next thing she did. She didn't leave right away. Instead, he heard her exhale softly, a long, trembling breath filled with emotions she had held back for far too long. Clara moved closer to the bed, and her voice, barely above a whisper, broke the stillness. "You'll never know how lonely you look, sir," she murmured. "Everyone sees your power, but no one sees your pain. You talk to no one, smile for no one. You built walls so high that even your heart forgot what warmth feels like." She paused, and the sound of her quiet sniffle pierced the silence. "Sometimes I wish you knew how many people still care, even if you can't see them." Alexander's heart clenched. He had expected flattery, maybe pity, but not this. He wanted to open his eyes, to look at her, to say something. But his pride held him frozen. He had built his entire life on never showing vulnerability. Yet now, lying still, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, regret. Clara wiped the dust from his bedside table, straightened his blanket gently, and glanced at his sleeping face. "I used to think people like you never needed anyone," she whispered. "But after seeing you sit alone every night, eating in silence, working until dawn, I realized, maybe the rich aren't the lucky ones. Maybe loneliness is the price of success." Her words sank deep into him like a blade of truth. Clara didn't know that Alexander had once been poor, that he had once loved someone deeply before losing her because his hunger for success had consumed everything else. He had buried his humanity beneath ambition, telling himself that wealth could fill the emptiness inside. But now, a maid, someone he had barely noticed, was speaking words that tore open the wounds he thought he had buried. Clara sighed softly, setting a folded napkin beside his bed. On it, she had written a small note, "Please eat something before the soup gets cold. And sleep well. You work too hard." Then, almost hesitantly, she reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, a gesture so tender it startled him even in his stillness. "I wish you knew," she whispered, "that you're not as unloved as you think." When she left the room, Alexander opened his eyes, staring into the dim light. He felt something stir inside him, a warmth, a flicker of humanity he thought had died. That night, he didn't touch the soup, but he kept the note. For the first time in years, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing her words echo in his mind. The next morning, he found himself watching her quietly from his office window as she worked in the garden, trimming the roses that lined the pathway. She moved carefully, as if each flower mattered. There was no rush, no irritation, only patience. He realized he had never seen her smile before. Perhaps because she rarely had a reason to. Over the following days, he began observing her more. He noticed how she helped the older gardener carry heavy tools, how she shared her lunch with the stray cat that always lingered near the back door, and how she always finished her tasks long after everyone else had gone home. She wasn't doing it for attention, she simply cared. One afternoon, he deliberately left his office door open while pretending to make a call. He wanted to test her again. When she entered to clean, she froze briefly, not expecting him to be there. He turned his head slightly, pretending to still be on the phone. She began dusting the shelves quietly. And then, just as she reached the framed photo of a younger Alexander with a woman, his late fiancée, she paused. Her eyes softened. She whispered almost to herself, "You must have loved her very much." The honesty in her tone cut through him. It wasn't gossip, it was compassion. The kind that didn't ask questions, didn't demand answers. It simply understood. That evening, Alexander found himself sitting by the large glass window, staring at the city lights. He remembered how he had mocked emotions, how he had dismissed people who spoke of kindness as naive. Yet now, a maid's quiet sincerity had shaken him to his core. The next morning, he called her into his study. Clara looked nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she stood before his desk. She thought she was being fired. After all, she had spoken freely the other night, unaware he'd been awake. But instead, Alexander said softly, "Thank you for the soup." Her eyes widened in shock. "Yes, sir." He nodded. "I wasn't asleep that night." The color drained from her face. She looked terrified, but he raised his hand gently. "Don't be afraid. You said things I needed to hear." For the first time in years, his voice wasn't cold. It was human, fragile even. He told her that her words had made him realize how much he had lost chasing success. He admitted he had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for without an agenda. Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she lowered her head, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to intrude, sir," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "You didn't intrude. You reminded me I'm still alive." Over the next few weeks, the mansion began to change. Alexander started eating dinner in the dining hall again, inviting the staff to sit with him. He reduced their work hours, gave them fair raises, and treated them with warmth instead of fear. He even joined Clara sometimes in the garden, helping her water the plants. The staff could hardly believe their eyes. The cold, unreachable CEO had become human. One day, as the spring sun painted the mansion in golden light, Alexander found Clara standing near the rose bushes. She was staring at a flower with a broken stem. "Some things can still bloom again," she murmured softly, trying to tie it upright. He watched her quietly and then said, "You were right that night." She looked up at him, puzzled. "About loneliness," he said. "It was my choice to build walls. But you," he paused, taking a breath. "You showed me what's beyond them." Clara smiled gently, her eyes shining. "Sometimes," she said, "people just need to be seen." And in that moment, Alexander realized he had been blind for too long, not because he couldn't see, but because he hadn't wanted to. Clara's kindness had not only healed him, it had taught him what love truly meant. Not romance, not grand gestures, but compassion that expects nothing in return. Weeks turned into months. Clara continued her work, but now, the mansion was filled with laughter, shared meals, and music. The air that once carried silence now carried life. Alexander began funding education programs for underprivileged workers and visited orphanages he once ignored. His company's motto changed from "power first" to "people first." He often told others that a single act of kindness had changed everything. But he never mentioned the night he pretended to sleep. That memory stayed between him and Clara, a secret woven into their hearts. Years later, when Alexander looked back on his journey, he realized that the moment he stopped pretending was the moment he started living. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of the beauty hidden in everyday lives. Speech balloon special request: comment below what lesson you took from this story, because sometimes, your words might be the message someone else needs to hear today. And as the camera fades out, imagine this: somewhere in a quiet mansion, a man once broken by success now smiles, not because he's rich, but because a maid once showed him what true richness means.